When my son started acting distant and exhausted, I knew something wasn't right. After following him and our nanny to a hidden basement, I braced myself for a nightmare, but what I found was a shocking revelation I never saw coming. I need to get this off my chest because, honestly, I can't stop crying about what happened. I thought I was living every mother's worst nightmare. But what I discovered was something I could have never expected, something that left me shaken to my core. For context, my name's Dana. I'm a single mom trying to balance a demanding career and raising my 8-year-old son, Liam. I work long hours as a doctor, and it's not easy, but I've always made Liam my priority. He's the light of my life, kind, thoughtful, a little shy, and we've always had a close bond. At least we did. Until recently. A few weeks ago, I started noticing something wasn't right. Every day after I came home from the hospital, Liam would look exhausted. And not just the normal kind of tired, he seemed drained, distant. His eyes were heavy, his usual energy completely gone. Worse, he looked scared. Every time I asked him what was wrong, he'd just shrug and say, "I'm fine, Mom." But I knew better. "Liam, honey, are you sure? You don't seem yourself. Is something going on at school?" "No, Mom. Everything's fine." He'd try to force a smile, but I could see through it. Something wasn't right. I asked Grace, our nanny, if she had noticed anything. She had been helping me out for nearly a year, watching Liam after school when my shifts ran long. "Oh, he's probably just tired from school," she said casually. "You know how kids are always a little moody. Plus, I don't let him watch too much TV, so he might be sulking about that." I wanted to believe her, but the worry in my gut kept growing. Liam wasn't a moody kid, and I knew when something was off with him. I just couldn't figure out what. I tried to brush it off as me being paranoid and overthinking things like I sometimes do. But every day Liam seemed to retreat further. It was like something was bothering him and it was eating at me. One evening, after I tucked Liam into bed, I found myself staring at the security camera footage. We had a couple of cameras around the house for safety reasons, but Grace didn't know about them. I hesitated at first, feeling guilty, but I just couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. When I watched the footage, my heart sank. Every day around lunchtime, Grace would take Liam out of the house. She always told me they stayed in, but the cameras told a different story. They were gone for hours, and when they returned, Liam looked dirty, tired, and distant. Once I even saw Grace wipe him down before I got home, like she was hiding something. I watched as she placed a finger to her lips and made a shush motion toward Liam. My hands tightened around my phone. What was going on? Where was she taking him? By the 4th day of watching this play out, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know the truth. I took a personal day from work, telling my boss I'd be late, and parked down the street, waiting for Grace and Liam to leave. Just as I had expected, around noon, they slipped out of the house and walked down the street. I followed them at a distance, my heart racing. They turned down an alley I hadn't noticed before, and at the end of it stood an old, run-down building. Grace unlocked a rusty door, and they both disappeared inside. I hesitated for a moment, fear gnawing at me. But I had to know what was going on. I crept closer, my hands trembling as I pulled out my phone and hit record. The door creaked open slightly, and I slipped inside, my footsteps barely audible. The air was damp and musty. It smelled like a place forgotten by time. I saw a set of stairs leading down into what looked like a basement, and my stomach twisted in knots. What was Grace doing with my son down here? I waited a few minutes, then crept closer. The door was slightly ajar, so I slipped inside, barely breathing. The place smelled musty, like old, forgotten things. I could hear muffled voices from below. I descended the dusty stairs, careful not to make a sound. And then, I froze. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. But what I found wasn't what I expected at all. The basement that I'd imagined as cold, dingy, and sinister wasn't. Instead, it was a large, brightly lit room. The walls were freshly painted in a soft olive green, my favorite color. I blinked, trying to process what I was seeing. Along the walls were shelves lined with fabric, thread, buttons, and ribbons, neatly organized. There was a small wooden desk in the corner covered with sewing patterns carefully laid out. What I breathed, completely at a loss for words. I hadn't noticed Liam yet, but when I looked up, there he was, standing next to a giant cardboard box in the middle of the room. His eyes went wide when he saw me. "Mom," he gasped, frozen in place. Grace, who had been folding fabric at the desk, dropped the cloth she was holding and stared at me, just as startled. For a few seconds none of us said anything. I couldn't make sense of the scene in front of me. All the fear, all the suspicion, it melted into confusion. "What is this?" I stammered, my voice shaky. "What's going on here?" Liam glanced nervously at Grace, then back at me, biting his lip like he always did when he was anxious. He took a small step forward. I was trying to surprise you, Mom." "Surprise me," I repeated, looking around the room. None of this was making sense. Why, what is all this? Liam shifted from foot to foot, his small hands clasped in front of him. "I found your old diary." "The one from when you were a kid," he said softly. "You wrote in there about how you wanted to be a seamstress, how you wanted to design clothes and have your own brand." I felt a sudden tightness in my chest. That diary. I hadn't thought about it in years. I could barely remember writing in it, let alone the dreams I had poured into its pages. Liam continued, his voice growing even quieter. "But you said your parents pressured you to become a doctor instead, and it made you really sad." I felt my breath catch. I'd buried those feelings so deep that I had almost forgotten they ever existed. And here was my son, reminding me of a dream I'd long since given up. Liam's eyes filled with worry as he looked at me. I just wanted to make you happy." Mom, his voice cracked a little, and he swallowed hard. "So I asked Grace if she could help me build you a place to sew. We've been coming here after school every day to work on it." I stared at him, my heart full but aching all at once. "Liam," I whispered, barely able to speak. "We saved up," he added quickly, pointing to the big cardboard box. "We got you something special." I glanced at Grace, who was now standing beside him, her hands clasped in front of her. She smiled, a bit sheepishly, but there was warmth in her eyes. "He used all the money he saved from birthdays," she explained softly. "We found a thrift store with a sewing machine that was in great condition. It turned into a little project for us." A sewing machine? My heart felt like it might burst. I slowly sank to my knees, my hands trembling. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You did all this for me," I whispered, looking up at Liam. Tears were already spilling down my cheeks. Liam's eyes filled with worry. "Mom, are you okay?" I couldn't speak. All I could do was nod. He rushed to me, wrapping his little arms around my neck and holding me tight. I hugged him back just as fiercely, my tears falling freely now. My sweet boy, my beautiful, thoughtful, loving boy. Grace walked over and quietly lifted the cardboard box. Beneath it was a shiny, modern sewing machine. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. It wasn't just some old thing from a thrift store, it was practically brand new. "We wanted to surprise you, but I guess we didn't plan on you finding out like this," Grace said with a soft chuckle. Liam pulled back slightly, looking into my eyes. "I just wanted to make your dreams come true, Mom," he whispered, "like you always do with mine." His words hit me like a wave, and I broke down, sobbing harder than I had in years. Not out of sadness, but out of pure, overwhelming love and gratitude. I had spent so long thinking that part of my life was over, that I had missed my chance. But here was my son, this little boy with a heart bigger than I ever realized, bringing that dream back to life for me. "I don't know what to say," I whispered through my tears. "Liam, you've given me more than I could ever ask for." Liam smiled, his own eyes shiny with unshed tears. "I just want you to be happy, Mom." I pulled him into my arms again, holding him close, as if I could protect this moment forever. The room, once an old forgotten basement, was now filled with light, hope, and love,